This video I'm going to cover the terrain tool and also how to create room spaces within Unity using paneling and also just the cube primitive. Um, so let's just go over really quickly how to set up a 3D project. Um, you would create new, and unlike we did before where we had the 2D node selected, we'll want the 3D node, and you want to add a few assets. What you want to add is characters, effects, and environment. And you click done and then create the project. Rename it like 3D unit, 3D module, or something like that, because we'll be working on this project from now until the end of the semester. But I will open the one that I had already created. There's just a few things to note in the 3D version of making games. The most important is the camera itself. We have a lot more options when it comes to customizing the way that the camera can see the world around us, because we have a 3D environment, right? In 2D, it just followed the X and Y plane. So now adding that Z coordinate, which we hadn't really touched in 2D, will allow us to really do some neat stuff with gazing and triggering things long distance, etc. But just some really simple things to go over within the camera itself is that the projection is always going to be in perspective. Orthographic is just only for 2D really. You can change the color of the background, but it really doesn't matter because you won't be able to see it. You can have like a solid color sky like so, but it just doesn't make sense for our purposes. I always use a skybox, and I will show you how to customize it so that it actually can look like a sky, or that you can have different effects with it. Once I create a ground, we'll be able to see why the skybox is neat and what it can do for us. Let's see what else that we have here that I should show you. Clipping planes really means that there is a certain point that you can reach within the camera's view. So if we look at this cone right here that is created by the camera, a clipping point means that once I put it in here, the camera won't be able to see further than that unit. And obviously that's great if you have a really long terrain area. For example, let's say you're in a desert and you only want to see a little bit of the desert at a time. You would change this clipping point unit so that you could only see bits and pieces. That way, when you continue to move along the space, you'll be able to see more of the world because it's only revealed depending on what number you have on here. Field of view narrows the cone of the camera. So let's look right here. The standard is 60, so I always keep it there. But if you decrease it, you can see that the area gets smaller and smaller, narrower, and the bigger it is, the wider area you have. But generally speaking, we always just want it standard. Alrighty, so that's all that I wanted to go over with camera stuff for this video. Another thing to note is directional light. In this case, directional light acts like the sun. If we shut it off, we lose all the light in the scene. And then once we turn it on, we have light all around. So one thing to note about directional light is that it covers the entire area of what you are making. So if you just have one directional light and a huge like forest area, the shine's gonna light the light is gonna shine down equally throughout the whole area. Obviously this can be different if you have other objects that are casting shade and things like that. So there are ways to manipulate the directional light, by through code and also by adding other smaller lights. Um, and here, if we go into the inspector and the drop down menu for type, we can see that there's a spotlight, a point light, and an area light. So there are different types of lights that you can have. But for the purpose of what we are doing in this scene, we're just going to keep the directional light. So the first thing that I want to cover is terrain. So terrain allows you to make a ground, but a ground with textures, not just a flat plane. So if you go to Game Object, 3D Object Terrain, which is what I did, you will end up having this huge plane within the scene that's going to be your terrain. Once I go into the inspector, there's a lot of things that I can do to manipulate the terrain. One of them being that I can raise it to make hills or mountains or different types of textures on the ground. I can also decrease that height to make kind of like depressions on the ground. And this tool right here with the raindrop is to smooth the height. It's kind of like your kind of like a blur tool, but not necessarily an eraser. It's like in between. So it's perhaps if you use it, you can decrease like a mountain that you make. But what it does too is that it smooths out peaks when you use the increased terrain tool. This little brush icon is the paint texture. This allows you to put in different textures on the terrain. Perhaps you want some areas that have grass, other areas that have dirt, other areas that have rocks. So you use this tool to paint the terrain with those different types of textures. Place trees is pretty self-explanatory. It allows you to place clusters of trees at the same time. Here in paint details, you can add grass, you can add flowers, and and whatever really you want. It's dependent on what you add within the details. And we will do that for the trees and stuff later. And here in settings, which is a small gear icon for the terrain, you can see all the specifics of the terrain. Its color, its length and width, its height, and other things that may be interesting to edit yourself so that you can really get a cool customized area. Another thing to note here is a height map. What that does is that it allows you to bring real data from let's say, if you go online and you find an area height map of a mountain range wherever in the world, you can bring in that like raw data terrain image within Unity, and the terrain will map out to the actual real terrain. It's really neat to use. I'm not going to cover it though because it's a little bit more complicated. But it's definitely something that you can do if you choose. So, let's see here if there's anything important that I should let you know about. Not really. Alright, so let's make some hills and stuff on the terrain. There's different brush types, and you can also change the size of them. But I'm going to use, let's just use the big circle. It's going to make it big. So here, if I hold down the left mouse button, you can start seeing these mountains, hills, and things like that, right? I don't have a mouse right now, so that's why I'm having a hard time navigating the space. Give 1 minute. Where's the area that But you can see that there's hills there. Let me just move the camera out a little bit. There we go. That's better. Much better. Alright. So there I created like some mountains or some height within the terrain. So now I'm going to go to the icon next to it to decrease the height. It says here to hold shift to sample target height. So let's try to do that as well. Let's hold down shift and see what it does. Do anything? Guess not. Oh, it did it without me holding shift. Right here you see. And I guess if you also decrease the height here, it should decrease it on here. Alright. So let's see what this blur tool does. There it goes. It smooths out all those rough peaks. Which makes sense. Alrighty. So you could really spend hours and days making mountains and things just with these 3 icons up here in terrain. So the next thing that I'm going to show you is how to paint the textures. So if we click on that icon, the brush icon, and we click edit textures, we can add a texture. What we're going to do is just select one here. So because you had added that assets package called environment, it should have included several textures that we could use for the terrain. So let me pick one called sand or something like that. Yeah, sand albedo. Alright. And then for normal, don't worry about it. Just selecting one is fine. We can add it. And then our whole terrain will be like this sands. This sand area. Because this terrain area is really large, in order to really look at the details, we should add a first-person controller. And that will be located in one of the asset packages that we downloaded with the project. So it is in standard assets. You should have character, first controller, and that prefab called FPS controller. You're just gonna drag it in, and then shut off the main camera because the camera is now on the controller. And what I'm going to do is lift up this capsule so that it's like right on top of the ground and it's not like halfway through. Now if I play it, you will have a first person view of the area. But let me actually maximize it so we can see better. Cool. So now we see this sand texture, we see these mountains and things that we made. The cool thing about this first person controller that's built in for Unity is that it has footsteps, the sounds, and it also has a jumping sounds. And you can use it, rotate the camera, like the view, with the mouse, and then move around with WASD, or also the arrow keys. So I'm gonna use WASD to move forward, look around, and then if I hit space, it has this really nice sound of being lifted up and falling on the ground. Alright. And this is our directional light, by the way. This sun right here, if we shut it off, if we shut off the directional light, then we lose our sun. But neat. All right. So now what I want to show you is that you can add a different texture so that not the entire area has to be sand. So if we go back to the terrain in the inspector and click that paint brush icon, and we press edit textures, add texture, you go and select, let's put a grass, rocky, albedo. All right, we'll use this grass rock one. I'm gonna add it, and with this new texture, the grass one selected, I should be able to paint areas. Let me actually make the brush size a little bit bigger. Should be able to see it, but there we go. So now when I hit play, we have a little bit of that grass, rocky area, and not just the sands. Cool. Let's look at our FPS controller. Alright. So really you can create paths in different areas by painting different textures on top of each other and create a lot of dimension within the terrain. Alright, so another thing that we can do is add some trees, and like I said, this tree icon is to make clusters of trees together. If you want specific trees with, like, for example, if you want just one large tree in the middle of a field, then you would just bring in a 3D model of a tree, right? And not use this. But let's add some trees. See what trees we have. So from the environmental package, you should have been able to have some import some trees. I'm just gonna pick this tree 9 too. All right, and let's add some trees. It's annoying. I don't have any real control over this. Because I don't have a mouse. All right. I'm gonna go back to the terrain of the tree. Okay. So I just added some trees there. And again, the only thing that I did was just to add the tree in the tree inventory here. Now if I want other trees, I would just do the same thing, add tree, go over here, and just pick a different type of tree. Now I would have two kinds. And let's put them over yonder. And then we have some trees. Awesome. So now if we hit play, we could see that the trees are casting a shadow. But what we can also see is that these trees are static. They are not moving at all whatsoever. So can we add a little bit of wind to the scene really easily? Yes, we can. If we go to Game Object, 3D Object, Wind Zone, this will create wind within our scene, and it's already an embedded function. And if you look at the inspector with Wind Zone, you can actually manipulate how fast the wind is blowing. So you really, and the direction too as well. So just play around with these numbers and see what number is best for you. But if we hit play here, we'll be able to see the wind rustling the leaves of the tree. Really cool stuff. All right, so the last thing that we really need to go over with terrain is adding grass. So we go back to terrain and we go to this little foliage icon. The same thing that we did with the trees, we're going to do edit details, add grass texture. Let's pick some grass here. Let's do this albedo alpha 1. And then we can make them smaller or bigger depending on what you want. And you can also change the color of the grass. But let's just keep it like this. And let's choose let's do the star one just because. Oops, that's too far. That's way too far. Alright, never mind. Let's do it right here by the player. So I picked the star one just so that you could see. Let's put grass in the shape of a star. Oh, did I not? I didn't do it. Hold on 1 second. Alright. Make sure that the grass foliage thing is within the details menu. But now this is a star. I added some grass in a star shape. Let's play. And the grass moves in the wind too, just like the trees, because the wind zone is in the scene. Cool. And that's how that works. If you want less grass, you would make the brush size smaller. You would go back to with the detail selected, and decrease the width. Minimum width. No, let's keep it. The width here. Let's do max width is 1, and then the height just to make the grass shorter. Let's do this. Actually, let's do minimum height 5.1 and then max height. Alright, and let's change this green. Alright, apply. And then let's do that. And now we can see that these grasses are smaller than the other ones. And they're a little bit of a different color. Sweet. And that's really how you fiddle around with the terrain. On the next video, I will cover how to make a room with cubes.